man, I get riled up about this because it seems so obvious, but I'm like, I don't see that attitude of like, yes, a crappy thing happened to me, whatever, and I got this.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Koch. What's a perception box? It's this invisible mental box that each one of us lives inside, built from the material of our beliefs, life experiences, and the meaning we've made out of those experiences. You could think of it as a kind of reality filter that's constantly shaping how we see ourselves, other people, and the world around us. This podcast explores how, although the walls of this box are always present, they can expand in moments of curiosity, awe, and wonder, or contract in response to fear, anxiety, and anger. In each episode, we invite experts to share how to create lasting shifts in our perception. I'd like to introduce our esteemed host, Heather Berlin, professor of psychiatry and neuroscience at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and Christoph Koch, chief scientist for the Tiny Blue Dot Foundation and former president of the Allen Institute for Brain Science. Welcome to the Science of Perception Box. This week, our guest is Dr. Scott Barry Kaufman. We all go through experiences that shape how we see ourselves, what we believe we deserve, and what feels out of our control. Scott's work explores how easy it is to organize our lives around a victim mindset and how quietly limiting that can become. The goal is not to deny what happened. It's to question the meaning we've made out of our experience. What might be possible if that meaning isn't fixed?
So first, we want to open up with our battle with the victim mindset. So Christoph, has there ever been an event in your life where you felt powerless, like a victim, and that really affected your outlook on the future?
Never really as a victim. I mean, as a school kid, I got beaten times because I was too much of a teacher's pet.
First of all, I'm sorry to hear that. I never knew you were like beaten up as a kid.
Yeah, in fact, at the school, they had to let me out earlier. So my parents talked to the teacher and then they had to let me out earlier so the big kids wouldn't get me.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. Okay, but I didn't know that.
I haven't talked about it in like 50 years.
Wow.
But I don't think it traumatized me in any way that I can now as adult ascertain. What about you? Have you had times in your life when you felt powerless and as a victim?
I had a very, the classic sort of Disney Cinderella story, evil stepmother when I was growing up. And she was pretty cruel to me. And I even had two half siblings who she was very nice to. Scott, welcome to the podcast. How do you define a victim mindset?
Oh boy. I define a victim mindset as a dynamic mindset. I get all these emails being like, I loved your book. It perfectly described my ex-boyfriend or whatever. And I'm like, look, this is a book for everyone, right? So it's a dynamic mindset that we can all get into throughout the course of our day. It can vary, we can be triggered. We can all have our moments. And when we're in this mindset, we blame all the world for our problems. We don't take responsibility for anything we can do. We're helpless, essentially. And the most important part of a victim mindset is we don't move forward with our life with agency or with productive rumination. In the field of psychology, they distinguish between productive rumination and Meshuggah rumination. Is the technical term for it, which is Yiddish.
Yes.
When you're stuck in Meshuggah rumination, you are constantly spinning this wheel over and over again about that one thing that happened to you when you were 3. Mm-hmm. And you forget that you are now in the year 2025. And in the moment, there's so many things you can do to realize your higher potential.
So victim mindset is not just, this is me and my ex. I was a victim, but it's generalized to all sorts of circumstances.
It's a broadened, generalized, dynamic mindset that applies anywhere you go. Perhaps you are in line at Starbucks and you're like, oh man, I really should be at the front of this line because I've suffered more than everyone in this line.
Do people think that?
I think a lot of people do. This book stemmed from my research on vulnerable narcissism, which is entitlement to special privileges because you've suffered and you think you've suffered the most, But I like to say suffering isn't a competition, right? And it's a much healthier mindset, which I call the empowerment mindset, to think about all the things that you can do to move forward with your life with purpose and a sense of growth.
Have you ever had a sort of victim mindset in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm human too.
You are?
Yeah, yeah. I got these things. You're surprised? Yeah, no,
Slightly,
but these things are totally seasonal. When things are going well, it's a lot easier to have an empowerment mindset.
So it's fluid. It's flexible. It's not like you
So
get
it's not a
locked into
personality
one.
trait.
Yeah.
Oh, it's both. It's both a trait and a state. It's a dynamic mind, but I want to focus not on the trait today. I want to focus on the dynamic mindset that we all can go in. But it also is a trait. Every psychological thing, if we want to really nerd out about it, is both a state and a trait. There's individual differences in virtually every psychological trait you could possibly look at, but it's something we definitely can come in and out of at different points of our day and our life. When things are not going well, it's our default state. So that was the insight that Martin Seligman and his colleague had recently, is that they got their theory completely wrong.
Completely learned helplessness.
Correct.
Theory.
They got their theory of learned helplessness wrong.
Maybe you can explain that theory.
Yeah.
I would be happy to, because they started off shocking rats and dogs. Well, dogs really.
Dog.
Yeah. Well,
That's
they
correct.
He's
extended
never
to
been
rats.
called out on that.
Well, we can do that if we want right now.
I'm happy to call him out on that.
They started their career, putting these dogs in cages
Right.
and keeping the door open a little bit so the dog could leave. And they were curious. The research question is, how many shocks will it take before they don't even attempt to leave anymore? Do they learn helplessness? That even if they're free, in their mind, they're in their own mental prison, right? And so that was the research question. And they found that it didn't take that many shocks before this settled in. But then they generalized it to humans.
If they couldn't control it, right? That was a critical difference, because they had these different groups, right? The dogs that could somehow control the shock, they did not have this learned helplessness compared to the ones that had no idea what prompted what triggered the electric shock.
Yeah. So feeling, yes, because locus of control, you feel like you're not in control of your life story anymore, or your future, or your, I don't know how the life story thing applies to dogs,
But so then how did it shift? So this has been in like the public ethos for a very long time. So what changed?
After enough studies on humans, they realized that their theory was not exactly correct in humans. They found that the default state in humans is helplessness. It's not what humans learn. So what is learned is hopefulness. And that's something that dogs don't have the opportunity to do.
But evolutionarily speaking, why would it doesn't seem like it makes sense on the surface why helplessness would be the default state?
Are you saying a baby is helpless naturally, innately?
Well, the mindset is...
The mindset.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Oh, yeah. Baby that's the best example of a mindset of helplessness you could possibly give. You're just crying all the time.
But they literally are helpless.
Yeah,
I mean, they need to recruit help. But why would our default state be helpless?
There's something very primal about a helpless state, which signals to others and gets us reward. I mean, it's actually pretty rewarding, even especially in the social media climate we live in, to signal victimhood. And a lot of people, I talk in the book about, it's independent. Victimhood is independent from a victim mindset. I want to be very clear.
There are actual victims.
Totally. There are horrible things that happen to us. And of course, we want the utmost of compassion for all that. But these things can actually come apart. You can have been the recipient of a horrible thing in the world and not have a victim mindset. You could not have had anything happen to you and generate a victim mindset.
So where's the difference in people that person A, something bad happens, they think of themselves a victim, and person B, the same thing happens, but they say, okay, this is bad luck, and they go on. Is it genetically? Is it the different upbringing? Is it because they locate the locus of control within them that ultimately I'm the actor?
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. The part 2 of the book is kind of looking at what are those characteristics of the opposite. One thing is you see a lot of people who don't fall into this victim mindset often. They've learned to be lucky people. It's not they're objectively lucky people. They're more open to luck in their lives. They're more receptive to things all around them. So they don't just focus on the negative of every situation and expect a negative in every situation. Gratefulness is another big part of it. There's a not just having gratitude for good things that happen to you, but they can be grateful for the crap that happens to us. They'd be like, oh, what can I learn from this situation? So that's definitely a big part of it. You said you brought up the dirty word the G word, and I'm glad you did.
Dirty? I mean, we are all products of our genes and our environment.
Oh, totally. But I mean, it's still a dirty word in a lot of circles because in a lot of these kinds of studies, they don't control for genes, and then they make claims about environment, like it's your parents' fault. And it's like, well, it is, and this is a point I make in my book, it is to a large degree, it's because your parents gave you their genes. Right. That's why it's their fault, But
aren't your genes for like resilience? Two people experience the same trauma. One goes on to develop PTSD, another doesn't. They're finding that there are genetic differences, and there's a protective factor.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I don't need to lecture you guys on how everything is nature nurture, and I don't believe in genetic determinism. There are certain dispositions that absolutely color your world and make it more likely that you'll view something as traumatic. You can take the same two people who've raised in the same family, and they have the same experiences, and one grows up being like, what a traumatic childhood I had. Mother was always yelling at us. And the other one may have more of a sunny disposition, is like, I had a great childhood. And it's like, wait, what? You both had the same experiences.
That's the perception box. The
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I don't know how this relates to Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No, he grew up with a twin or with a younger brother.
Oh, that's true.
And
he had an abusive father.
Yes.
And then he died in a drunken car accident.
Became an alcoholic. And how does this then relate to kind of a negative self-schema?
I'm a personality psychologist as well, as like creativity, but really I'm really into different sources of personality variation. And the trait neuroticism, I don't think we really realize just how pervasive it is across all internalizing disorders. I mean, some people argue it's the trait that it's the central nucleus.
It's one of the big five.
It's one of the big five. Yeah. Oh, I can do a little lecture of the ocean. The ocean. Okay, we got openness to experience, which is my favorite. That's my favorite, is openness to experience. Yeah. I scored 99% on that one. And then we have neuroticism, which is literally your brain is wired to constantly feed it negative thoughts. Is basically how we could put it. And emotions. You're just constantly like, think Woody Allen, right? Like constantly you're walking around the city like, oh my God. And it can be funny, when you verbalize it out loud. The neurotic mind, it can be kind of funny, but it's not so funny when you're living it. Extroversion, introversion, agreeableness, and then conscientiousness.
Well, we didn't go in the order of ocean.
Oh, you're right.
Open-mindedness, conscientiousness. Yes.
So are you implying there's a relationship between the narcissism trait and victim?
Yes, but vulnerable narcissism. So there's two different types of narcissism. Everyone thinks narcissism, they conjure up a bravado kind of narcissism, right? Which is like, I'm the best. But my research has really dived into quieter form, and it's neurotic. We call it neurotic narcissism. There's something very excessively self-focused about depression, for instance. Now, when I say that, I'm not at all trying to diminish the real suffering of people who are depressed, but there is something about you get stuck in this default mode way of thinking about yourself, that you just can't stop ruminating about yourself in a lot of ways, and how this is going wrong, and that's going wrong, and this is going wrong. So it's a unique form of.
But are the other types of narcissists ruminating about themselves in a positive way?
Yes, they really are. They're just obsessed with admiration and accolades.
So they would not fall into the victim. The sort of the.
Well, the tie I wanted to make was between vulnerable narcissism and a victim mindset. We all can fall prey to it. It sort of takes a different flavor. It's interesting to think about the different flavors of how these things can manifest these selves. The kind of victim mindset that you see in vulnerable narcissism is a very woe is me type of victim mindset of like, I'm not appreciated enough for my suffering,
Right.
Whereas the grandiose one is I'm not appreciated enough because people don't realize how great I am.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different flavor.
So do you think social media encourages the victim mentality?
Well, I had a conversation with Jean Twenge about this. She wrote the great book, Generations. And I was like, is this current generation a nation of vulnerable narcissists? She's like, yup. She's like, you nailed it. Because prior generations, it really was about grandiose narcissism. But the self-esteem movement in the 80s gave rise, I think, to grandiose narcissism.
But I
Give 'em
think it's a
yeah.
societal problem because, like, when you think about stuff like the coddling the American
coddled
mind,
mind.
yeah, like, this started with safe spaces and trigger warnings, and everyone can't handle anything uncomfortable. And then the professors capitulated, and it was like also from pressure from parents. Oh, I don't want my kids to have a bad grade. I used to, when I was teaching at Vassar, would have students come. They would hand in the essay before the essay was due so they can find out what they needed to do to change it to make it a good grade. And now, in my day, in our day, whatever, you didn't have something in time, you didn't have it on time. Now everyone gets extensions and you can do
It's
it.
true.
And so there is this sense of like teaching the victim mindset. And it's like at a societal level, like, no, you can't handle it. So we'll create these accommodations for you. And so it's both from an internal, like psychological, but also this external societal phenomenon.
You're right. There's a sort of how does society reward some of these things?
How can we help people expanding their perception box? You're not curious, you're not open to the world.
This is such a this topic of this book is so related to the perception box. It's such a natural fit. Even the notion of us being getting ourselves in these mental prisons is a very perception box kind of way of thinking about it. We have to constantly remind ourselves that the door's open, metaphorically. We have to constantly remind ourselves there are steps we can take immediately that added up over time may lead to long-term changes and will probably be, or at the very least will make it more likely than not. I have a chapter in the book on don't be a victim to your emotions. So that's about not identifying with your emotions and taking them so seriously, treating them as facts, that because I'm feeling this sensation, I have to immediately jump in and take it seriously, that it's something that needs attention immediately.
So dissociating myself from my emotion, that they are two different things.
Yeah, the word disassociate has a specific meaning in clinical psychology, so I'm wary of using that word, but not identifying. Saying, I am not this anxiety feeling that I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling something that may be anxiety, but I am more than that. I am a strong mother beeper,
And also just because you're feeling something doesn't mean make it real. I mean, you're justified in your feeling, but doesn't mean that the thoughts that you have around it are real.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My personal story, real quick, in 3 seconds. I had an auditory learning disability when I was a kid, and they interpreted that as, I was stupid because it took me an extra millisecond to process information. So I was bullied a lot. I was put in special ed, but there was something within me, a fire that was burning where I did not want the crutches and I wanted to be just treated like every other student. I had to fight my way out of special ed. And I was the first one in my school district for the kid to break out, of special ed because.
Oh, you mean not the parents to move you, but
like it didn't doesn't dawn on students. I don't understand what was different about me, even to today.
You had a higher sense of agency. You located your locus of control within you rather than your parents or
but when
your
I have
teachers.
a student in my office saying like, hey, professor, just so you know, I get 3 times extra time on the test. And I say, have you thought maybe you can handle it? I'm not saying like, I want to put you in a situation where I'm going to embarrass you or but like my tests are really easy. And I was wondering, like, it might give you a sense to you put yourself in a challenging situation to learn more about yourself, to learn more about your limitations, to question it. And they're like, no, it never dawned on me. And no, I get that's it. I've yet to come across a student who questions the accommodations other people put on them. And I wish there was more of that. I wish more students believed in themselves even more than other people.
When you challenge them in this way,
they can't even think in that term. It's taboo. It's taboo to question that someone might have higher potential for themselves than they realize they have. And I think that's part of the problem is that we need to shift something in our collective consciousness where we all start to get outside of our comfort zone and see what we're really capable of.
We need adversity to grow, right?
We need adversity to grow. Absolutely. Oh, man, I get riled up about this because it seems so obvious, but I'm like, I don't see that attitude of like, yes, a crappy thing happened to me, whatever. And I got this. And that, to me, that's what an empowerment mindset is. It's honest love, acknowledging honestly that something happened. We're not wiping it under the floor, rug or whatever. And we're also saying, yeah, and I got this and I can move on and I got resiliency.
But I think the problem is also not to blame parents or whatever, but this is a mindset of like, they're not allowing their children to fail. parents have to allow their kids to fail. So when I'm doing therapy with a kid who has OCD or neuroticism, whatever, I have them practice. We'll do purposely get this one wrong on your homework. And we're just going to sit with it and see how you feel with that discomfort and see if you can tolerate it.
Awesome.
And it's like inoculating them because life is going to throw them, the curveballs, and there's going to be difficulties. And if you're in the mindset, if you think I always have to win and I always have to get A's and not everyone gets A's. And so inoculating your children and allowing them to fail will give them some resiliency. Definitely. And they don't fall into this victim mindset, because then it becomes either I succeed or I'm a victim.
That's exactly right.
But is there something is there any sort of neural correlates to any of this, or like, is it related to neuroplasticity or ability to change a different mindset? Or is there any research on this?
It's interesting. I don't think that a neuroscience explanation always it adds extra explanatory value.
I'm shocked.
I'm going to walk out of this interview right now.
It's funny. I have this friend who is obsessed with everything I say. He has to convert it into neuroscience. He's like, "But what's the neuro basis of that?" Right. And I say, "So what?"
No, I agree. I agree with you.
So, and now I love neuroscience. Don't get me wrong. And I actually started my career studying the neuroscience of intelligence. So I do think there's value in those domains. But when it comes to, I'm not sure what additional value it adds to know that your amygdala was active.
Mechanisms. Once you know the mechanism, you could, if you think about it, intervene using pharmacology or using brain modulation technology. That's what people want to do, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes there's too much of a obsession
with technology and fixing your brain.
My summary of this is that even if we could discover the neural mechanism, let's say, of victimhood or of, a growth mindset, and we can implant electrodes to put us into this positive mindset all of our lives, it might make it less meaningful, just like everyone gets a trophy.
I think it's less meaningful.
And you don't have a contrast, right? Happiness all the time means nothing if it's not in contrast to something.
No, you're right. I think that there are all sorts of different approaches in life, right? There are top-down and bottom-up approaches. Some would argue maybe a combination of both are good. Something interesting about the sort of bottom-up neuroscientific, like if we use TDSC, for instance, I hear you, and I get the emerging technologies that could potentially, you undergo a TDSC treatment and it completely just deactivates.
Unpack, say what TDSC is.
It's an electrical current that can temporarily completely deactivate a targeted portion.
Like transcranial magnetic stimulation.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so there are, some people argue we might have a thinking cap someday where it deactivates your left brain so that you can actually think more outside the box and we have more insights, things like that. And increase the chances that you'll have a creative insight. Some people are using it for depression. Some people are using it for anxiety. Let's say we had a TDSC protocol that allowed you to shift immediately when you're in a victim mindset and you go, boop, oh, now I'm in an empowerment mindset. Would that be such a bad thing? No. I'm not saying that'd be a horrible thing. However, what is my however? What am I grasping at? I'm also a humanistic psychologist, not just a cognitive scientist. I'm also a humanistic psychologist. And there's something that I think I don't want to ever lose, which is the humanity of the journey of self-actualization. There is no protocol for self-actualization. And I think that's what bothers me sometimes when we get so stuck on trying to find the protocol for happiness and realize that there's a great Nietzsche quote, like there are plenty of people who will be happy to tell you to walk down the bridge with you. But you and only you can plumb into the depths of your soul. And you have to take responsibility for that self-actualization insight.
So what you're saying is there's no prescription for self-actualization.
That's what I'm saying.
It's an individual journey.
It's an individual journey that has to be lived. It has to be lived.
Right. Which means you have to get some scrapes and bruises along the way.
Yes.
But it may also be helped along and nudged along here and here by all sorts of, by other people. By books you read, and maybe by psychedelics or by TMS or some other technique.
And that's for sure. I don't, I want to still stay respectful of a lot of people who are doing amazing advances in neuroscience, amazing advances in and are even creating protocols and things for helping us be happier. But when it comes to the full self-actualization of a human, I don't want to lose the humanistic aspect of it.
So I think the important thing, as researchers who have been interested in studying the relationship between the physical brain and the mind, that there is still something about the experience itself, the psychology itself, that we still can't just explain by the underlying mechanisms. That has to be a lived experience. Like, you have to experience life to achieve these levels of self-actualization. And there might not be a formula for that.
And not just experience, but also examine your experiences. All that is very important. I mean, there's simply different levels of analysis, right? Understanding why I feel the way I feel based on neuroanatomy and neurochemicals is a level of analysis. But I don't think it's the same exact understanding as understanding why I feel the way I feel because of its threat to my existential dreams, desires, and hopes for the future.
Those are different levels and different explanations. Yeah. So we're going to do a little game. We're going to talk about a movie character, and we're going to discuss amongst ourselves whether they are a villain or a victim.
Amazing.
So I'd like to talk about Darth Vader.
Nice.
Victim or villain? What is your take on that?
Victim or wait, are those my only two options?
What is there a third? What's the third option?
The thing about him, which is what I think a great example is, I think he's a great example of overcoming a victim mindset.
What? Okay, explain. Do tell. Okay.
The dude, can't breathe. He's like, he's not.
He managed to become like an evil emperor despite his.
Yes. Now, I'm aware that maybe the thing the agency that he applied to his life may have moral connotations. I understand that, and I acknowledge that. However, I still think, and I think it's also a great example of how you can overcome a victim mindset and you don't necessarily use it for good. You have a villain origin story, and you overcome that, and you're like, I'll show the world.
Yes.
And then you end up not doing great things, but a
lot of villains were hurt as children. And
every single Superman movie, right, always has an origin story where something bad happened. And either they became good or they became evil.
That's right. But they still both overcame a victim mindset.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, but
that's a good
Spider-Man,
point.
right?
Yes.
They killed his parents when he was young. Or Batman, they killed his parents when he was young. And Batman overcame a victim mindset and helped others. I think
Spider-Man too. His uncle got killed and then he became, he said, I think, again, I'm not a huge comic person, but I believe that he could have stopped the robber who ended up killing his uncle, and he didn't. And then from that point on, he thought, I have to now, protect people.
Yes.
And stop these bad things from happening.
Yes.
But it's a really interesting point that you could overcome victimhood and either use it for good or evil, your newfound.
Absolutely. There's evil agency and there's pro-social agency. Yeah.
But the important point here for our purposes is agency. You have to develop a sense of agency. Yeah. Otherwise, you will always feel I'm not responsible.
Helpless.
It's always the system that does me in.
That's correct.
Yes. So, you have to take up arms, but how you use them depends on your personality.
Yeah, that's true.
Every week we ask a perception box question.
Amazing.
And this week, Christoph picked the question. So you and I don't know what the question is, and we are going to answer it.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Have you ever gone through something painful or very uncomfortable that you later on reassessed as actually being very positive for you?
Yes. So I recently, past couple of years, took up magic as a hobby, mentalism. And in the beginning, I would constantly embarrass myself. I would go out to bars. I would go out to just anywhere I could do. I would set up a beach, Santa Monica beach path. I set up a table. It said, free magic, I'll read your mind. I did mentalism. And I just put myself out there to the experience of rejection. And I learned so much from that. And it did hurt in the beginning, like I got a lot of rejection, but I'm really glad I did it because I stuck with it. And now I love it.
I personally choosing to get divorced has been was a very painful thing to have gone through and to go through. But in my case, it was the right decision. And I'm glad that I did it. But, sometimes things in life are very difficult and you don't realize until after you go through them that you actually grew as a person.
So you do feel that you did learn something. I mean,
yeah. I actually learned that I am even stronger than I thought I was. I think. Yeah, no, I did. Like, I thought I maybe I won't be able to, it'll be
Stressful.
it's so difficult for me to get through this. Like, that'll be difficult for me to function and do my job and take care of my kids and do all these things, simultaneously. And I wasn't sure that I could do it. But I, in some ways, surprised myself. And I learned that I'm more resilient, even though I had gone through these childhood adversities than I thought, I was.
So it's a perfect instantiation, right? That you grow through adversity. What is it? The motto of Kansas, per aspera ad astra. So adversity to the stars. So I guess that's very non-PC now.
I think we need to, the message of this podcast is we're like promoting adversity. We're promoting sitting with discomfort and because that's where growth
I
happens.
think that's what it is. It's perceiving the discomfort in a different way than you're used to perceiving it.
Yeah. And using it.
Adversity to the stars.
I like it.
I love that.
The state motto of where I was born. I was born there, as you can hear.
In Kansas, of course.
Kansas.
That makes sense. Scott, thank you very much for joining us.
It was such a pleasure to be here.
It's been a pleasure. And if you'd like to learn more about your own perception box, spend some time this week answering the same perception box questions that we asked our guest, and check out our other questions on our website at unlikelycollaborators.com. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch the show or listen wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Science of Perception Box, created by Unlikely Collaborators in partnership with Pod People. I'm Dr. Heather Berlin.
And I'm Dr. Christoph Koch. Thank you.